so much for being here. This is a great opportunity for me and one that I didn't necessarily expect so quickly, so I'm thrilled to be here. My students used to say that I would get overexcited and talk for too long, so if I start doing that today, somebody please throw something at me, and I promise that I will stop and we will get out of here on time. So the parable of the Good Samaritan is probably one of the most popular and most well-known parables from the Gospels. To the point, actually, where we have something known as the Good Samaritan Law, and a lot of hospitals are named after the Good Samaritan. The basic concept of a person who is willing to go out of their way, and sometimes at great personal risk, to help another, is one that has just been built into the fabric of our society at this point, and that's great. But in some ways it means that we have also heard this story so many times that we stop understanding what Jesus really meant and what he really wanted to communicate to us. This whole parable is a response to an extremely basic question, right? Who is my neighbor? Who is this neighbor that I have to love as much as myself in order to inherit eternal life? And here's a thought. Jesus could have just said everyone, right? Because that's eventually what this story is going to boil down to anyway. But he knew that for a person of faith who has heard his or her entire life, to be a person of faith is to be called by God to love everyone, that it's way, way, way too easy for us to say, yeah, I do that. I totally do that. You know, I help the elderly cross the street, or I rake my neighbor's leaves, any of those other cliches, right? We all have neighbors that are really easy to love. Some of you know that I just moved to Hoboken, and there is a woman on my street named Michelle who walks her cat on a leash. It's really, really easy for me to love Michelle and Chester, right? We all have our Michelles and our Chesters. So who is the neighbor that's difficult to love? A lot of you have probably heard from other homilists and other teachers and other people that it was actually pretty radical for Jesus to use a Samaritan in this story. To simplify what is ultimately a really long cultural conflict, the Samaritans and the Jews really hated each other. The Jewish people felt that Samaritans were some kind of half-breed, right? The result of Jews intermarrying with Assyrian captors. So they were not only betraying their faith and their culture by assimilating with oppressors, they also had diluted the Jewish faith and were no longer worshiping the right way. And again, to oversimplify, the Samaritans really did not like the Jews because of how harshly the Jews were treating them. These two groups were sworn enemies, but in the end it's a Samaritan who helps this Jewish man who has been beset by robbers, right? And only after a Jewish priest and a Levite, who is essentially a scholar of the law, an expert in Jewish law, have already passed on the other side of the road and ignored him. So I think the message here is almost a little bit obvious. It's first of all, a warning against religious hypocrisy, right? The priest and the Levite should know better than anybody else that it's their God-given duty to take care of that man on the side of the road. And it's also an injunction to understand that even our worst enemy, who may have wounded us really deeply, is also our neighbor, and we need to love them. But here's the thing. You've all probably heard this before, right? Love your enemy. We've all heard this so many times that maybe it starts to lose meaning. It's still an important, extremely relevant message. Just this past Friday, I actually had the privilege of going to a protest called Lights for Liberty. And it's a protest where people stood up against the inhumane conditions in border camps. And it was really amazing. It was like truly, truly a wonderful experience. There were amazing speakers there. And while I was standing there, I was thinking, this is it, right? We're doing it right now. We are loving the stranger. We are loving the foreigner that other people fear. We are standing up for what's right. And it was easy to love my neighbor in that moment. It was easy to love my neighbors to the south who are suffering unspeakable conditions. And it was also easy to love my neighbors who were standing up with me at that moment. But then, honestly, I was extremely humbled by the words of a very wise speaker there, who said, this is really nice, and it feels really good, but how often do we smile at somebody that we pass on the street? And that made me think of a slightly different angle to the Good Samaritan story, which is this. If we come away from that parable feeling contempt for the Jewish priest and the Levite, then we have utterly missed the point. Honestly, Maybe that Jewish priest or that Levite felt like I do when I walk past a homeless person in the subway, right? I think, oh God, I really want to help you. Maybe I can give you some change, but hang on, everybody has always told me that you're probably going to use it to go buy drugs. So wait, maybe I should buy you some food, but then what if I try to help you and you hurt me? Oh no, I'm panicking now. Let me keep walking, and I keep going. I am overwhelmed by powerlessness and fear, and I pass by on the other side. We've all been that person, broken and bleeding, rejected and reviled, desperate for help. I know I've been there so many times. We've all also been the Good Samaritan because we are genuinely good people and we want to help. We really do. But we've also all been that Jewish priest and that Levite for whatever reason. And that's okay because we are not perfect and we are never ever going to be perfect. But with that knowledge, maybe we could try to love the priests and the Levites in our own lives. Because the point of being an interconnected, universal human family is that no one gets left out. Not because of political party, not because they believe something different than we do, not even because they hate us or ignore us or leave us bleeding on the side of the road. We love them. And sometimes, as I have learned recently, love means telling hard truths with compassion. Sometimes love means listening to a different opinion in order to foster better conversation, more productive discussion. And sometimes, honestly, love just means not flipping somebody off when they cut in front of you on 495. It's not easy, and we're not supposed to be good at it. I am really genuinely not good at it sometimes. A lot of the people who know me in here can attest to that. But it really is beautiful too. It's radical and it's worth doing because the awesome, loving, beautiful Creator God who asks us to do it loves us radically as well. And when we feel that kind of love, when we really feel it, how could we not reflect it back out? Thank you and God bless you all.
And we love you.
Thank you.